do indeed have it bad, bad. As Daggy, Oli and Barney back together again a week after the, I was going to say resumption. What did they do? The end of the comp?
Conclusion.
That's the word. Opposite of resumption. Concluding the 2022 NRL Premiership, and we're going to talk about the top four teams just to put a nice bow on it all and give you something to listen to this week. We're on double duty today because after this and after another, well, probably 6 beers by the time we get there, we get to do our bold predictions for this year and look back at who had the boldest winning prediction last year, which I'm looking forward to. But before then, how are we all?
Yeah, going all right, mate. A bit tired, late night, early start, but we're getting through it.
Standard weekend.
Yeah, double duties. Gave myself a good, gave myself a pasting on Friday and Saturday night. So
Beautiful. And Oliver?
I'm well, but what have you got bad? I'm a bit worried about you now.
Syphilis.
Oh, God.
you don't have to touch him, Oliver. It's okay. I know he says you do, but you don't actually have to.
Yeah, it's not. You're not contractually obliged. Do we talk about news? This is not really what to talk about.
Not really. No.
Let's just talk about the teams.
Yep.
Fourth spot this year was taken out by the Parramatta Eels, getting there with a late flurry and getting all the way to the grand final, in fact. So, who wants first crack at this? Oli.
Well, I had Parramatta finishing 7th on the ladder, so probably it's weird to say I sort of underestimated them a bit because I feel like there were still large parts of this season where they were Parramatta, right? They were their sort of typical self, sort of underperforming at different stages, but they sort of just did enough to make the top four to the point where they actually secured 4th spot in the last round and then went on to make the grand final. Dylan Brown was, I think, the standout in terms of compared to performance last season. So I guess you could say overperformer, or even Sean Lane, right? Either of those guys. Actually, probably more Sean Lane, overperformer. Best player, probably Isaiah Papali'i as well. Consistently been great since he's gone to Parramatta, going to the Tigers next year. Yeah, I just think I was obviously wrong because I made the top four. I didn't have him to do that and definitely didn't have him making the grand final. And I will say now as well, I've been on record multiple times on this podcast throughout this year and last year saying that their premiership window for me closed in 2020. Well, they made the grand final this year, so I'd say that's probably an open premiership window, even though they didn't win it. But I think it might be coming to a bit of an end now anyway. But yeah, for me, the overperformer, probably Sean Lane. You can chuck Dylan Brown in there, but player of the year has to be Papali'i, doesn't it?
I think so.
Be close to it.
What do you think, Barn?
Yeah, well, they had 16 wins and 8 losses, which was one or two of those losses were unexpected too against some of the bottom teams when they were expected to win those games. So I actually had them finishing 4th, and which they did. They averaged 24 points, 4 and 20 against, which is probably not the greatest record of someone in the top 4, which sort of shows their inconsistencies at times during the year. But on the whole, I think they overperformed. I had them in 4th as, you know, I realistically expected them to finish the way they did the season previously.
I had a bit lower, but I think when we all had these teams sort of 4th and 5th, we probably underestimated. We probably thought it was a weaker comp this year, and I think
it was just because Melbourne sort of lost a few more than what they did the year before, whereas Penrith and Melbourne the year before just sort of dominated anyone that they played for large parts of the year. But I think they slightly overperformed through the final series more so than during the season. But they finished about where I expected them to during the normal season. I thought there was some underperformers in this team big time. There was Jake Arthur, obviously. The bloke didn't get enough time to really stamp his name and became the ire of the Parramatta fans. But you definitely have to say it's an underperformance on the amount of appearances and time that he did get out there. There was a couple of games where he didn't look like he belonged out there at all, even though he was only out there for maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time. When he did have large chunks on the field, he didn't sort of perform to where he should have. Wonga Blake, massive underperformer. The bloke has one good game out of like 8 or 9, and it's a bit of a mystery to me how he continues to be picked in a first-grade squad. But Nathan Brown, another one. Obviously, something's gone on in the background there. I thought he was going okay before he got dropped, but the fact that he missed half the season has to go in that underperforming bracket. And Mahesi Makatoa, I thought he would rise to another level this year. where he ended up being a bit bench player and having no real impact once he did come on the field. So
last year, there was probably that period with Makatoa where he was coming off the bench. It's when Parramatta lost
it was
3 or
around
4 in a row.
14 or something to like 20.
Yeah, and he was there.
Yeah.
He was their best player. Like they were losing.
He was averaging 60 70 Supercoach points week after week, and then this year. Obviously, overperformers. You could say probably Paulo, considering what he's come off of having that tag of sort of being pretty lazy realistically during the last couple of seasons. I thought he was a much more consistent player this year. So, yeah, I think he sort of shed that tag of the inconsistent underperformer from previous seasons. So, yeah, Paulo for me was an overperformer. Dylan Brown was one of their biggest overperformers considering where he came
because,
from.
obviously the fans love him. He didn't do a lot. He had the breakout year, then didn't do a lot second year.
Absolute tripe out of him last season.
Yeah.
week in and week out.
But Para fans love him. Is there still a consistency issue with him?
Not coming off the back of this year, I don't think.
No? So you're happy for what he puts out
I
each and
don't
every
think
week?
there was many games where you didn't sort of mention him. His running game absolutely came to the fore this year, which was a
they've got the right balance. They've got the right balance
to,
that he's accepted. It's not his job to do anything but be a running 5'8", I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And when he can get into the line and sort of disrupt the defence a little bit, and then he's got the blokes on his inside and outside to help him along with it, it makes a massive difference. But I thought he was a massive overperformer in that team. Oli already mentioned Sean Lane. He had his best season of his career, and if that wasn't an overperformance, considering again another one that we've given a fair bit of stick to over the last couple of seasons since we've been doing this show.
Well, he's now in the discussion for probably best hole runner in the game, the hole hitter.
Absolutely close to it.
I thought that both their edges were the key to Para's success this season. Him and Puppy, and they were both absolutely sensational, especially for the last 3 months of the comp.
Got that deadly offload in him when he gets it right. It's just like another tackle, realistically, off the back of a hard charging run. Madison was fantastic week in and week out. Again, we see some attitude issues arise right at the end of the year. I don't know what that says for next year, but you didn't hear anything about his attitude this year, so it'll be interesting to see what prevails next season. But I thought he was fantastic for him this year. Reagan Campbell Gillard, another one who probably had a career best year, apart from maybe when he first really wrote a name for himself at Penrith. It would have been close to one of the best seasons of his career. And another one that I really wanted to mention was Penasini. I thought he was fantastic for a young bloke coming into the centres. You see most of them sort of come in and they might catch fire for a game or two and then just disappear. He was very consistent. Even these worst games weren't that, realistically weren't that bad. If you're going to size them up and compare them against some other centres out there at different teams around the crowd, around the NRL. But yeah, I thought he was an overperformer as well.
Look, let's look to next year. Realistically, is it danger signs? Oh, actually, last one I didn't touch it because none of us have. I thought Mitch Moses was fantastic.
Yes,
it was brilliant all year. His kicking was in discussion for at its best. He's got as good a long kicking game in the game when it's right, and the rest of his attacking kicking was, I think, pretty pinpoint.
I just left him off the overperformers because this is what
I didn't say no overperform, but.
He was fantastic.
Good halfbacks get their team, as it's the Gumpism from the start of the year. The best halfbacks get the teams to the big games, and he did go into the grand final, and he didn't go missing at all. I can't think of too many games he went missing, unless they'll completely belted out of the game in a couple of those ones through the mid there. And I thought it was probably his breakout year to really stamp himself as a top line number 7.
Well, with Moses, for me, it is probably the first time, because he had a good 2021. I think it's the first time he's actually gotten better after having a good year. There have been years where, he had a really good season, then he sort of lets you down the next year, bit of an underperformer. But I'd say 2022 is probably the first time where he's not only strung two good seasons, but he's gotten better. So
28 try assists, 78% goal kicker, 2 field goals, and 7 tries throughout the year. So decent enough year. He's obviously he's never going to be defensively Nathan Cleary or anything like that, but plenty of teams will pay $1 million for him. Right, the window's now closed, is it, for Parramatta?
I think so,
is this their shot from what they're losing? Obviously, Papley is a massive loss. Marnie's a massive loss. His service is as good as anyone's in the game, and his defence is top shelf. But it's the bits and pieces that they lose that is the next concern, because you could almost cop it if they still had Niokore and Kafusi. But them going two now means you go from testing your depth to having no depth, and that's
and having to
a
rebuild.
tricky thing, especially with on the back of very little signings. So where do you see next year sitting for Parramatta?
Look, there are people saying that they'll struggle to make the 8, and I think they might, in the sense, like points-wise, with a couple of rounds to go, maybe even the last round they could miss out, but I just feel like they'll be there. I'd say probably 7th max, to be honest, but I think they'll be 7th or 8th.
But
I think they'll be scratching just to make the 8, to be honest. I think they're going to be... They'll lose at least 2 rungs from where they were, and they're going to be one of those teams that are going to be struggling to match it with the better teams in the comp. Like they'll probably get blown away a couple of times by some of the better teams.
Yeah, I can see they suddenly become that team where their centre can collapse. You'll see it around half hour in the game, their middle will collapse and they'll just get steamrolled and concede points, I think, which is a concern. They're still going to be fine with a strong enough spine, but I think there's a lot of work to do there at Para, especially even without like Brown looks like he's going too. So there's another.
Yeah. You're going to lose 50 tackles from Mahoney, Papali'i, and it could be interesting.
Third place, the Cowboys. Clearly the surprise packet of the year. I listened back to our last year's bold prediction show last year.
Do we need to verbalise where we had them?
We all had them running last. So you've got to give massive kudos to Todd Payton. You've got to give kudos to what Townsend was able to bring to the team and did. Incredible effort, hey, Barn?
Absolutely, mate. Average 26 points for and 16 against, or 15 against, sorry. 17 wins, 7 losses. These next 3 teams we're going to talk about were the 3 fittest teams in the comp. They were the teams that backed up week after week. You never really saw them tired at any stage during the majority of the games during the year. Obviously, everyone has an off game here and there, but these were the teams that just kept coming at you for 80 minutes.
And isn't it funny?
3 best defensive teams as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct.
Isn't it funny how you get the teams down the bottom whinging how hard pre-season is? I don't know, only just as a Tigers fan, obviously, I know what used to come out of there. The players are treated too hard. But I imagine trying to actually get them fit. And at the end of the year, the 3 fittest teams, and for years and years and years, Melbourne's been the fittest team because you'd have the famous boot camps at the start of the year and everything else. And isn't it amazing that fitness shines through? And
you just go through and you listen to pretty much any one of the Cowboys that was talking about Payton and how they wanted out of the place after the first 6 to 8 weeks when he was coming around and kicking their doors in at 4:30 in the morning and running them up that fucking hill that they've got up there at North Queensland time and time and time again.
I'd hate the bloke as well.
30, 40 degree temperatures in the off season, like just trudging up and down that hill. And kudos to him. He'd get on his bike and ride it up there with
I was going to say, Chad Townsend was telling a story and he said they were all just like giving it to him. They hated him. He's just riding his push bike.
Because his knees are fucked and he can't run.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, like obviously you have to set a standard. You have to drive your players to a certain point. Otherwise they don't, you're no chance in even getting anywhere near the top 4, let alone winning a comp. They're massive overachievers. And the awards followed for, player like Centre of the Year in Holmes and Coach of the Year in Todd Payton. I think they'll be stinging badly that they lost to Parramatta in that prelim to get into the grand final. They were every chance of a grand final and probably deserved it more than Parramatta realistically from where they'd come from and how their season had gone. The Hammer was definitely a slight underperformer for mine. He ended up not finding himself in the team, and then when he did, he was in bits and pieces, and he'd even drop out of the team at different times, which I expected him to be, cement his name in the centres and be one of their better players this year. Ben Hampton, what can you say? He just he didn't even really make an impact.
I like Ben Hampton.
Didn't really make an impact at all, did he? I think he played 1, maybe 2 games during the year. But there wasn't really a hell of a lot of underperformers in this team.
Well, I think when we first ever started the show, I was in love with Ben Hampton.
I remember when he was...
Anyway.
Yeah, and this year's probably not a whole lot of his fault, but the fact that in every position he can play in...
Yeah, other players did it better.
Yeah. And that's why. And speaking of Tabuai Fido as well, this sort of impacts him a bit. I'd say one of the overperformers is actually Peter Hiku. I'd say as well. He had especially, and the reason why I think of him straight away is because I specifically remember last year bagging this signing a little bit, but he was absolutely fantastic.
He was brilliant in some games.
Yeah.
Like, he was probably the reason they beat the Sharks in that semi-final. And again, in the next game that they... the previous game they played as well. He's for a bloke who's, a year or two away from retirement.
Yeah, he's been around a while.
He's flying around. He's moving really well at the moment. Drinkwater, massive overperformer. I think you might have even had him sacked. Was it last year or the year before?
I know
Gump had him sacked. Gump was particularly hard on it. Cohen Hess and Drinkwater were his two go-tos there.
But he was brilliant especially with his ball playing for this team, and he added another dimension of attack for them. Both their halves were tremendous. You already mentioned both of them. Drinkwater for mine was a standout out of the two of them. His running game could take him to a whole new level. Tierden, sorry, not Drinkwater. Yeah.
Well, I didn't realise he was only 20. He was 21.
Yeah, he's a kid. He started when he was 17, I think, at the Broncos. He's still got a good 10 years in him for the rest of his career, and if his running game improves and he gets maybe bulks up slightly, he can really be a threat with the ball in hand, and he could be one of the best halves running around for the next 10 years. Tuolangi looks like a young superstar coming through. He's got big, strong balance. He's got a bit of that. What do you say, machismo about him as well? I'm better than you, and he fucking knows it. So if you want to try and take me on, good luck to you, kind of stuff. And Valentine Holmes, he was their superstar this year. I'm amazed at how well he's come back from, obviously there was always question marks coming back from America.
Him half of last year.
He's changed his whole body shape as well.
Which was always
he looks completely different from when he came back to now. But he's got that speed back. He's electric every time he touches the ball. I think he's now a 90% goal kicker on top of that. But he was brilliant for him.
Did we ever think there would come a time where we'd be doing a North Queensland Cowboys review and name at least 10 players before getting to Jason Taumalolo?
No.
And you couldn't put him in as an overperformer either.
Yeah.
So the one I didn't mention either, which
Ruben.
Yeah.
Which, Tom Gilbert, Griffin Neame, the whole young group of forward pack.
Here's the thing, and we say this, we're very hard on Newcastle, the players that go there. Good coaches make players better, and you can go through to a man and they
we wrote them off because we looked at the pack and went, who the fuck are these blokes? They're no one. They've never done anything.
Ruben Codd is now
they looked
an Australian
atrocious
prop
in defence last year. And then within the space of one off-season, he's turned them into one of the best defensive teams in the fucking competition.
Up until possibly the start of this year, even just on Ruben Cotter, his primary position was hooker. He was a backup hooker.
He was.
But Reece Robson was in discussion for New South Wales, and is now in demand. Someone who a year ago, who was he?
He would have to be the third behind Appy and Cook. I think we were talking about on the show earlier this year, and if one of those guys was to go down, you had to replace him with a hooker. There's
he was
no
in
real
there.
argument
I think he was added
Robson.
to the squad for
game three.
Yeah, Robson would be, and the only one that would be closer would probably be one of the Brayley brothers. But they, Robson was better than them for big parts of the year. So.
And it's like you said, it's not like they're not a club who went and signed. Yeah, they signed a premiership halfback. It wasn't Nathan Cleary. It wasn't Adam Reynolds.
No, he was still sitting at what 6th or 7th best halfback in the comp. It's not like he was. And
I think we probably knocked it. I think we were quite critical on it actually. Because he didn't have a great last year at Cronulla.
Well, in his period at the Warriors too, he just sort of...
Yeah.
But he had that line move.
For them to overperform, like I said, almost to a man, is pretty incredible. And they're going to... Oh, pardon me. Obviously, there's going to be issues around what happens with Luciano now. We probably won't see him again. And... They're going to lose, but they're only losing Hammer.
They're going all right without him. So
yeah, that's right. He did add size. He was actually good.
He added a bit of size.
He added size and was quite dangerous. But they're going to then they lose Hammer, who they can live without. So they're going to be fine next year. They're going to, if they follow the same structure, and they're going to be better for the experience.
They can find 2 kids coming through. You get Lukey back as well. You got to remember he was missing for a big part of the year, and before he was injured, he was going fantastic.
So you get them back. They've had the finals experience now. They'll be hardened. They'll be hungry. They're a scary team next year, actually.
Absolutely.
Very scary team. Anything else to add?
Not really. I think we pretty much end up covering them all off.
The Sharks, second. Barney was quite bullish on them in the pre-season, but I don't think any of us thought they're going to run second.
No.
Obviously, all to do with the soft draw, so I keep getting told, Barn. But,
you only had to verse every other team in the competition at least once.
And beat most of them.
Yeah.
But, what was your take?
We did, to counter that argument, we did say at the start of the year that they did have one of the better draws in the competition.
Draws are relative, though, because at the time when you look at it,
the
you think, they're an
top 8 teams.
They're an 8th team playing other 8 teams. We had 5 or 6 teams.
Titans and Knights finished in the top 8 last year.
Yeah.
So whether they all of a sudden become a tick instead of a 50-50 game, then it changes the whole draw altogether, doesn't it? But what do you say, mate? I'm going to biased as it is, but they went fantastic. 18 wins, 6 losses, averaged 23 points for and 16 against. Massively overperformed. I expected them to finish 6th. They ended up finishing 2nd, obviously. I was very disappointed by their finals performances, so I can't see how they'd think any better of it than what I would. They'd be absolutely seething, I would imagine, especially that game against Souths. They were never in that game. And realistically, they were in front. I used the
phrase a lot about Brisbane about the fuel gauge running out. Was that Sharks' fuel gauge?
I think so. They put everything into that game against the Cowboys, expecting to win when they were every chance of winning, and probably should have closed that game out. Yep. And then they would have had a week off going into Parramatta the next week. So could have been a completely different story. I think if they win that game against the Cowboys, they probably get into the grand final. But that week off does help them, but it's all what ifs and could ofs and should ofs and didn't right now. So
somewhere in the multiverse.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll be seething, and I think that'll only spur them on to even bigger performances next year. To be honest, to lose to the Raiders twice, that hurts. Just especially coming down here and seeing.
Just don't like the Raiders.
7 years, mate. We haven't beaten them in 7 fucking years.
And considering one of your best mates is a Raiders fan,
absolutely. Let's put it out there. The underperformer in the team was Moylan. I know there was big parts of the year where people were singing his praises, but he definitely underperformed again. He was better than what he was the year before, so that probably even says something else.
I would even go as far as to say for the majority of the regular season, he was good. But then when it actually came to the whips were cracking and they were an actual premiership contender, it seemed he at least just sort of capitulated a bit.
Talakai definitely underperformed as well. I think that was more of a structure. They didn't use him as an attacking centre, and if you're not going to use him as an attacking centre, you may as well put him back in the middle, because the last 6 games of the year, that's all he did.
Yeah,
was take second tackle hit ups, and that he was making 200 metres every game, but it wasn't out in the centres. It was through the middle of the field, and There's a whole difference of having someone out there. Like, I know if they run straight at him, he folds blokes in halves. Yeah. But as soon as you get someone with a bit of footwork and a bit of speed, he's all at sea trying to defend out in the centres. So, for me, he was an underperformer. He had some really good games, and he always put in, but they just didn't use him properly, which led to him probably not reaching the potential that he could have at the back end of the year. And I thought Finnegan, to be honest, was a slight underperformer for me. Didn't play the minutes I expected him to. There was a fair few injury issues, which happens, obviously, getting a bit older. But
it also felt like he never really got going.
No, his leadership was always there. Like, you could see that he's always out having a crack and going at 100%. But he just didn't seem to have that impactful run or that impactful tackle, apart from taking Crichton's ear off that one game. But I think you'll see better things out of him again this year. 33, 34?
It's very hard to beat. Like, realistically, how many props / middle forwards get to 32, 33 and still keep going?
Yeah.
Like let's say Petro. Petro...
He wasn't bad. I just expected a fraction more out of him, to be honest.
I know, but maybe... And for a long time there, I think it took a long time for Fitzgibbon to get his head around their forward rotation.
The way they were going to use McGuinness.
And just how it all worked. Yeah. And probably by the end of it pulled the right pin.
Rotation. Yeah, he did at the back end of the year.
But, Oli?
Well, an overperformer for me, and I'd say that the best player for Cronulla was Nico, and I say overperformer in the sense that I certainly didn't have him as the best player in the comp at the end of this
half.
season. I think he definitely overperformed. In that sense, I think someone as well who maybe not even overperformed because consistently, but someone who definitely deserves a shout, Blake Brayley. He probably doesn't get the credit he deserves, especially in defence each week. He gives decent service out of hooker, so he's just definitely someone I'd want to give a mention to. And to be honest, we've spoken about it, but the backs, right, out on the edges as well, they're as lethal as any combination in the competition, I'll go as far as saying. So I think those blokes as well, Mulatalo's,
Ramian, talk about Barney
Will Kennedy when he was...
That's Mulatalo all over, isn't it?
Well,
doesn't like getting better.
No, he doesn't.
Which you want, but...
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Will Kennedy I thought was still good other than when he would have his brain snaps and when he got suspended and injured.
Wasn't quite up to
not
last year's
year,
performances.
but
Yeah, so
I think he was
the
good. I think he was
eternal
still good.
Gutho-Kennedy argument, where's it currently?
Kennedy. I'll say Kennedy.
Okay.
Or...
The ball plays just as well.
Kennedy.
It'd be a 50-50 toss of the coin. Depends who turns up on the day, I would imagine. But if you're going to sign someone for 3 years, you'd probably be going and signing Kennedy before you'd be signing Gutherson for a 3-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What's next year hold?
Well, just a couple that we missed. I thought Nakora overperformed this year on what he's done the last sort of couple of years. I thought he was really good, and he became a really important option for him at the back end of the year. Running that back line. Running the lines out in the back line there, and McGuinness was close to their best player every single week that he played.
Him.
He was fucking fantastic, man, and he's right up there with the best buys of the season. His defence is as good as anyone, and his leg speed, and every time he hits the ball, you never see him just sort of plod into the line and back into the line and try and offload or whatever. He's trying to get through the line first option, and then if he doesn't get through the line, then he's looking to turn and offload after that. But
so you're freeing up. So Fafita's going.
Yeah.
You're freeing up some spots.
Tolman's retired.
Tolman's going. You really need a bit of creativity, probably from one of those forwards, a new fresh forward maybe.
Would help. Yeah.
Kafusi will help, I think, a bit.
Oregon Kafusi, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you need a 5'8" end of the day. I think Sharks in the comp need a 5'8". Someone like the perfect bloke would be someone like Adam Dewey. You can just break tackles, kick occasionally. A Dewey or a Brown or...
I think they've got I honestly think Lockie Miller could be turned into a 5'8", to be honest.
I agree with
you. Touch footy player. He's got some ball skills.
I saw
definitely
enough
got
out of
footwork.
him where he should be in a 17, I think.
He's got footwork and speed, and he looks like he's got a decent passing game as well. So I couldn't see how... Like, if you're going to find a spot for a touch footy player, it's fullback or 5'8", isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, there's no real other spots on the field to play unless you're going to put him on a wing and just burn people. But
I think with Nico as well, you can actually sort of have a situation there where you tell Miller more times than not you can run the ball. Follow Nico, but also you got freedom to sort of run the ball when you sort of see fit, and Nico will take care of sort of controlling the side. I think
if
that can
work.
work.
Half a gap, just have a crack at it. Whereas there was a lot of times this year where there was broken field play, and even when Moylan did try to put his foot down and go through half a gap, he just doesn't have the pace that he used to have.
But even in that last final,
most of the time he didn't want to run the ball either. So.
Even through that finals, the last finals game, there was time and space where they could have exploited, and they actually didn't know what they would. Once Nico was out of play, there was no second thoughts on that. Whether it was just trying to get Brayley trying to get Nakora into a gap.
Bill Kennedy looks like he could probably even play 5'8" if you wanted to put Miller at fullback. He's definitely got the passing game. Yeah. Big, long, lanky, decent speed. But
at this stage, realistically, if you've got the pace, you can play either one. If you're happy to defend in the front line, so maybe that's.
And he's a little bit bigger than Miller, so he might, he could probably maybe get through a bit more defensive work than what Lockie Miller would. But
Wade Graham, where's he at?
He's a bench player for the next year, maybe 2 years, and he'll be retired and going to England or France.
25-year-old Wade Graham would be perfect for this team.
Absolutely
perfect for this team.
Absolutely would.
He would have probably nearly got you home at 5'8" in a couple of those games, but anyway.
Yeah. He's at the end of his career. He's been a really good servant, you know what I mean? Like the last 4 or 5 years of his career, he's been a back rower who kicks a little bit, and but he's dropped away from what he used to be, but he still have a spot in this team for the next 12 months.
He had back in the year. He was actually pretty good. A lot of those games.
When he got some time on the field,
he was pretty good. Teague Wilton, he always had a spruik.
I don't think he comes into the first. I don't think he comes into the starting side. I think he still plays the same role that he plays at the moment. 40 minutes of backup second rower.
So who's in what you get? Ueli, Rudolph, and Hunt is your prop rotation.
Yeah, and Kafusi.
And Kafusi. We can do both.
Franklin Pele should find his way into the 17. There's been a spruik on him for a while, but he's still only a kid. I think he's only 21.
The other option is you push Finucane into the front row full time and give McGuinness 80 minutes because you know he can do it.
You got your Wiltons on the bench and
maybe throwing your rotation through them.
Jack Williams, I don't think played a lot this year. Who's another back rower, sort of in the same mould as Wilton that could come in and play a role off the bench. But
what's it mean for next year?
I think they'll be as good, if not better, than what they were this year. To be honest. Another year under Nico's belt can only help. I really want them to find someone that's 6'4" and 115 kilos, to play in that middle.
Eddie Blacker.
They need a big middle.
Eddie Blacker or
they need a
like
big
that.
middle to replace Fafita. Because even at the back end of the year, while he wasn't incredible, there was games there where he was quite good and very effective, and it just suits the Sharks. The way that they play, someone to come through the middle of the field, whether that's Pele or Oregon Kafusi, given more time for them next year. But I think they'll be there when the whips are cracking again next year.
I know this player doesn't specifically fit that mould, and we've brought him up before, but I want your thoughts on him specifically. Let's just say tomorrow the Sharks sign Martin Tapau for 2023. What would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, as a bench rotation, I wouldn't want him starting.
Yeah.
I think you've got your
I
Wellies
think
and
that's
Rudolph
set. That's
and
probably,
something. But the bloke I'd be going looking for is Clemmer. He's not happy at Newcastle. You saw how good he was for Newcastle this year. If I was Fitzgibbon, the first bloke I'd be calling is David Clemmer.
Do Cronulla have sort of a good amount of money to actually?
Well, there's 2 mil there.
Okay, then
Between Tolman and Fafita, there's like 1.4 plus there was somebody else who's just gone out of the team that I can't quite think of. But actually, they had money left over this year. They had about 500 left over. And between Tolman and Fafita, they're looking at having about 2 million spare to spend. So
Powell's not a bad like for like for Fafita, but
start
Clemmer's
Clemmer and then have Tapau on the bench rotation.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Anything else to add?
Not really.
I agree. I think they're going to be there and thereabouts. But them and the Cowboys are the two most interesting teams for next year because they're going to be both better for the run, have enough young talent that's going to be more seasoned.
And they are quite young, both sides.
Yeah,
as well.
and be more seasoned and be hungry. They're two teams that I imagine we get our prediction show will feature heavily. All right, the Premiers, the Penrose Panthers. Well, they're the best team in the comp. They're the fittest team in the comp. They were the goodest at football, Barney.
They had some the breaks go their way, to be honest, as well.
Oh, you don't say.
The Cleary suspension ended up only being a good thing. The resting all their players a week before the finals, and it all just seemed to click into place come grand final day. So
I still think that
they did run a risk.
In other teams that can go wrong. Yeah. So you've got to say.
Well, even you saw the way that they started against Souths in that first preliminary final, they could have been blown away, boy. Souths could have come out and scored another 2 tries, should have scored another 2 tries in that first game. Yeah. And then it would have been a hard road back to try and win that first preliminary final, and then they all of a sudden have to go and do it the hard way. They don't get another rest before the finals, and so things sliding door moments, but they did it well, and it worked out. It worked out to the minute, realistically, come grand final day. What do you say? I had them first. I said that they'd be lucky to lose many games all season. I said they could probably go through undefeated, but not quite. They scored 26 points on average each game, and they conceded 13. So good luck beating a team when they score twice as much as they let in. 20 wins, 4 losses. The best team all year, deserved winners. Hard to find an underperformer in that team week in, week out. I couldn't find one, to be honest. I couldn't find an underperformer in that squad.
Not from what their roles, no.
They all did their job. They did it perfectly. Overperformers, realistically, half of them you expected out of them as well, but Cleary, by far and away.
I reckon a gun to my head, if I had to pick an overperformer, an underperformer, I'd say Jerome Luai.
Yeah.
But it's not his. It wasn't really his place.
Yeah.
And he was injured and suspended and the things in between. But yeah.
Well,
and Stephen Crichton for a long time. I think he Went from elite
But he still always
centre
does
to...
his job. You know,
And had his best games in the final. A lot of them did produce their best games in the final, including the white. And that's actually not a knock on either. I'm just saying if you had to pick someone.
For the majority of the year, they were probably a little bit below where you expected them to be.
Well, in the terms of if now there's a salary cap crunch, I can imagine they can live without Crichton.
Yeah.
If they want to, they can live without Crichton. They can live without... We'll see how they live without some of the other players. But...
Well, when you've got the next Australian squad coming through your junior system, you can probably afford to lose all of them eventually.
Tongan squad. Samoan squad.
Well,
he
both.
seemed to...
all three, maybe.
Seemed to play better missing half an ear, to be honest. So maybe you should go say thanks to Dale for that.
Yeah.
But ever since that, he seems to put the headgear on and he just played tremendous footy after that. But
He might keep it on now.
Cleary and James Fisher-Harris, you got to put in as not really overperformers, but they were fantastic week in and week out, which is sort of expected, maybe slightly overperformed. But the three big ones for mine were Appy.
Yep.
Appy Coruscant definitely overperformed from what I think the majority of people expected out of him. Most people expected him to be good, but he was fucking amazing for the majority of the year, most games. And then you throw in the likes of Sorensen, who I think just seems to... He's getting better. Like, he's only playing a bench role, but he's getting better week in and week out.
I don't know what it is. I just love him so much. I don't know. He's just great. He's in, you know how we talk about teams of favourite players. He's probably starting second rower for me.
No, he just puts his body to work week in, week out, never shirks his responsibility, takes the tough hit-ups and tough tackles. And Dylan Edwards, for me, was probably the biggest overperformer by a long way, considering, 3 years ago, the bloke was struggling to catch a football and ended up getting dropped, and the way he's turned it around. And it's just his positioning. I don't think there's a fullback in the game that positions himself better. Oh, maybe
Teddy's
in defence and attack. Like, every time a ball's rolled through, he's there. Every time there's half a chance, he's always there. Even if he doesn't get the ball, he's always in position to, assist in the attack when it's happening. And, for me, he was easily their biggest overperformer.
He was phenomenal, to the point where now people are whinging that he's not the Australian team. Is a credit to him, a credit to what he's done with his game. His attacking play, his ability to run 300 metres a game on top of that positional play. And from all reports, and if you go back...
The fittest man in the universe,
if you go back,
apparently.
they let, like we've said, they let Savage and Laurie in the same sort of generation go, and always said he was the one. Even against Penrith fans, they got it right, I suppose. They saw it, and understand his defensive positioning is great. His ability to call the game behind the line is tremendous. And, he is an absolute breakout year, and interested to see what he does bring to the table next year, Oliver.
Yeah, well, I had Penrith finishing second on the ladder and losing in the grand final, so... pretty hard to do, but I underestimated Penrith this season. A lot of that was based off of how good I thought the Roosters would be. But overperformer, definitely Dylan Edwards as well, in the sense that there were people towards the end of the year, and I know we personally weren't, but saying that he could actually win the Dalian medal, or that he was up there and being mentioned in terms of best players in the comp based off of the season. So, to go from obviously dropping... 3 balls a game and getting dropped from the squad to doing that, I think definitely, and this has been the best year of his career by far as well. You could go close as well to saying he was Penrith's best player. For me, it's either Edwards, Yeo or Coruscant, one of those three. I think Cleary was really good as well, but it's hard to say. With the suspensions, and he wasn't there as much, and probably I'd say overall last year, Cleary was better purely because he was on the field more. I
just
think
funny
with
the Dally M chat is there's just so much recency bias as it comes to it.
Of course, and we had a look
I think
at
he had 1 point before the round 12 or whatever it was.
Plus, also, I
good
think
luck
people get
making that kind of.
But there's recency bias, but then there's also not, whereas everyone just thought Hunt was winning because he was on top at round 15. When you actually sit down and look at it,
round 12.
We hadn't even know any Will Ray. He wasn't even in the top 5, was he?
He wasn't top 10.
No,
he wasn't top 10.
And it's just. There's people to get lost in the week in and the week out. When you go back and actually have a look at it, to say, even the fact that Teddy got as close to Nico Hines as he did sort of astounds me, to be honest, because there was games there where he was given 3 points, and Manu wasn't given one.
Yeah.
Whereas we
Well,
had
that-
we had him having the 3 points. You know what I mean?
When we
But-
looked at that whole table, it was actually atrocious. But that said, I wish they still allowed you to bet on it because I would have had a fucking crack at Nico.
Absolutely.
Oh, we would have made some money.
And you
off
would have
that.
got $3 or $4 as
Oh,
well.
Yeah.
it would have been money for Jam. And anyway, they've barred it ever since whenever it was a couple of years ago.
Bellamy, yeah.
So but anyway, I'm going to get strung up on Dally M voting at the moment, but how bad? Like, it made literally no sense. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. We could do a whole show, I reckon, in the off season and go through the list and just fucking laugh at every
Yeah.
single one of them on the way up to the top
Go through,
10.
like
Like,
I actually
seriously, the
refused.
top 10 they got pretty close.
Barnes showed
the
me
rest
the
of it
list,
was
and I refused to
fucking
believe him. I said, that's not. We didn't know. I'm sitting next to you. That's not the
He
list.
sat there for an hour. That can't
not-
be right.
That's
That's
not the list.
right.
And blokes like Olakuate on 2 points, and so
Tarpanay on 5
Oh,
or something. It's like, yeah, okay.
anyway.
Cool.
Well, I think at least for me, it sort of dawned on me. You know, I know at least you for a bit, Dax, it was sort of going and understand why there could have been a bit of a twist in the tail because sometimes there is, but
Maybe it was hitting hope as well.
for me,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I understand, but
We all wanted them beat.
for me, from about from a personal standpoint, not against Para. Once it was against Para, I was well and truly on with Penrith. But look, maybe from maybe about round 7 or something, I was like, well, Penrith's probably just going to win the comp again, and they did. So
As I said, I used the analogy. We used to use the death by 1,000 cuts, and that's still it. But then, yeah,
I think
the
they've
drag-
added to that a bit
drag
as well.
them out in the
though,
deep.
yeah.
Like they just go through the motions and complete what they have to complete. And it's weird because even the other night, Trev was sitting here going, "Oh, they're just the most boring team in the comp." And teams you'd say about Melbourne, but what they do is when you actually watch football, they're better at what they do
Yeah, but
than
that's
everyone
what
else,
they
and they have
do
their processes
week in,
and they
week
trust
out
their
when
processes.
they have to. But you have I think the grand final was the best game Penrith played in
Absolutely.
the last 3 years.
Because that was the most
Like,
complete
they've been
game.
dominant as.
Well,
but
someone in terms of underperformer, look, we knocked Liam Martin this year. He, after playing Origin last year, and he played again, and we actually had question marks on that throughout
whether
the
he should
year.
have been picked, yeah.
And he was phenomenal in the finals. Crichton was phenomenal in the finals. Tuo was phenomenal in the finals. People were questioning Tuo. Couldn't believe it because he was on the wrong side of the field to what he's used to, but also to what Penrith played. But when he got back to the right side, look what happened. 2 tries and 700 metres, and off he went. And
And they were just completely in control in that grand final. They dominated in every aspect of the game. And it was probably one of their best attacking games, even though they did sort of switch off their attack for the last 20 minutes of the game. But that was just an absolute thorough performance out of Penrith, and that sort of rings alarm bells for everybody else going into next year.
look, there is
They
hope.
have lost a couple.
There is
but
hope because they are big losses. I'm sure they can absorb. Like I've said, I think Penrith are 6 lengths better, and now they might be 2 or 3 lengths better. So we'll see how that plans out. And then, at some point, injury they've been either through good luck or good management. They've got away from any massive, serious injuries.
Well, it's weird. Over the past couple of years, you look, and it's not that they've necessarily avoided injuries. The injuries have just come at sort of the perfect.
Cleary
like the
did have a
perfect-
shoulder. Did have the
perfect
sole
time,
shoulder,
yeah.
but they managed
Yeah.
it well
One
enough.
or two at a
It was
different
sort of
time.
this year the injuries came very early, and last year the injuries came so everyone came back the week before the finals and they were fresh and ready to go. So it's I wouldn't necessarily say a lack of injuries, but maybe blessed with the injuries that they've had and when they came.
Timing, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of it, again, will come down to injury, suspension, and just for general fatigue.
And that-
because
that
there's going to be
turns
more
as
of them
well.
playing Origin as well.
That
and
turns as well in that, if I had got touch wood, and I'd hate to say it, don't wish injury to anyone, but if Cleary does an Achilles in round 1, then the whole comp just goes, oh, hang on a minute.
Absolutely.
Oh.
It does.
Or Fisher Harris, or like we saw even the games through Origin period, there's games with the Tigers and was it the Bulldogs should have beaten them? And then it's just Fisher Harris and Uppy just
It was
tend to go, just got
the
them out.
Tigers, yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a bit.
Yeah.
I think it was a similar game against someone else, but just the last 5 minutes, their best players stood up, and I'm sure that'll continue. Like there's still depth there, but they are massive, massive losses. Given how good Kikau was fantastic this year. For a player
Absolutely
that's
was.
always been pigeonholed as, flair, a bit of flair, but what do you get in defence? His defence was fantastic at times.
Defense was
His
brilliant.
scramble, his ability to, and I say it a lot about back rowers. The really top class back rowers find a way to be there, get that ricochet off a ball more, and kick out, and in defence more so than attack. Kick out seems to always be there, get a hand under it, or who does. Sean
And he
Lane's
went
another
back
that's
to playing
great
his
for it,
role
but-
a little bit more this year, where
Yeah.
like not having to be involved all the time, not getting in the way of the attack, knowing when to inject himself, and
And maybe that comes with a bit more confidence. Cleary's now more confidence. He's saying, just stay out there.
piss
You'll-
off your big
Yeah,
bastard.
we'll get it to you when you need it to you. And they go, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an element of that too. What does next year hold?
Top 4 minimum.
Yep.
Again, we'll be in there, kicking, ripping and tearing at the end of the year. Obviously, it comes. We'll know a lot more in 11 months from now. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish 4th and win the comp, but I think they'll lose a few more games during the year than they have this year. I think you'd be looking more at like 6 or 7 losses rather than just having the 4 during the year.
I can see them dropping those Origin games that they've managed to keep for so long.
I would say probably 3rd at worst, to be honest. It's going to be a lot harder. A lot harder to win the comp and even make the grand final. But I feel as though during the regular season, I think they might drop a couple more games. But largely, it will be sort of the same story that we've seen. And then come finals time is where we might see that sort of added depth to the competition, I guess you could say, really come into play against Penrith.
I think the competition's going to be weaker, to be honest, but we'll get to that.
Fair.
In a certain show, or
Well, stick around at some point in this Spotify feed. There will be a bold prediction show where we get to have some fun and, as I say, throw some shit against the wall and see what sticks in 12 months' time. And anything you want to finish on? That's the wrap of the season. It's been all right.
No, well done, Penrith.
yeah, they
what can you
deserve it as
say?
well.
They're the best team.
Absolutely
They're the
well
fittest team.
deserved.
They're the smartest team, and they won the comp. So who's to say anything else?
And we'll be saying the same fucking thing for the next 3 or 5 years. That's what pisses me off the most.
Look, and the way I sort of think about it as well, whilst yes, Penrith will probably might not be the team, but they're still going to
One of.
They're going to be like sort of like Melbourne, where they'll win at least
If
2
you're a
in the
Penrith
next
fan,
5.
you're not going to be spend the next 5 years depressed. You're going to
You'll be buying a jersey every year.
You're going to be in discussion. Look, Serraldo might be, but you don't know. Maybe Serraldo's the genius
I
behind.
saw him the day after the grand final. Actually.
He was up at the Great
saw
Guns.
him at Panthers. We went down on the Monday to have lunch to say farewell to the Baileys, and standing behind us in line, I just wished him well and said hello, and yeah, it's
good.
nice. So
Him and Peter Wallace are up here. Oh,
Sunday night
must have
Or the Monday
been
night?
no, it must have been. It would have been the week before the grand final.
Yeah,
Come up for a couple of cheeky beers and watching 360 or something inside.
Scandalous. Don't let
No,
Paul
no,
Kent
no,
hear.
no.
Don't let Paul Kent hear.
Yeah, they're just guys.
Were they playing the pokies at 9
No,
p.m.
they
for
did not
fucking
play the
buzzers?
They did not play the pokies, and they were very responsible.
This is probably not the way we should have ended this show.
Why change the habit of 3 years? Eh? Anyway, that's Footy and Frothies. That's our sign-off for the reviews proper, eh? So back shortly. Leave us some feedback through all the general posts, socials, YouTubes, Twitter, all the rest of it. And bold prediction time coming up soon.